All right, it's 8:01, so let's get started. Welcome everybody to the webinar, What is Carbon? I'm Lenny Teytelman, CEO and one of the co-founders of Protocols.io. And as the agenda, I'll be talking about the private side, the secure and private collaboration on Protocols.io, which is what we call Carbon. And the name of the webinar is What is Carbon? But actually, before we get started talking about the workspaces, an overview of the functionalities and some of the key benefits of this side of protocols.io, I want to talk about why we're talking about Carbon before we talk about what it is. And to do that, I actually want to start out with this concept of internal reproducibility is the way I think about it. Because often when we talk about reproducibility, we are in research thinking about published papers. And that's only part of the reproducibility as I think about it. So a good way to illustrate what I mean is to think back to what some of you know is the Reproducibility Project Cancer Biology, which was a multi-million-dollar effort to just take top 50 published molecular biology papers and preclinical papers and cancer biology and independently try to repeat and see if you can get the same results as reported in the papers. And the first results of this project were published in 2017, and Ed Yong, writing in the Atlantic about it, wrote, "The hardest part by far was figuring out exactly what the original labs actually did. Scientific papers come with method sections that theoretically ought to provide recipes for doing the same experiments, but often those recipes are incomplete, missing out important steps, details, or ingredients. In some cases, the recipes are not described at all. Researchers simply cite an earlier study that used a similar technique." And this is how we usually think about reproducibility. Actually, I will stop there because, of course, I forgot. I forgot to mention. I forgot to mention some important notes. Sorry about that. So the webinar is actually being recorded. There will be plenty of time for questions and answers at the end of it. So I'll talk for about 20 minutes and then we'll have 10 minutes for Q&A. But so feel free as I talk to put questions into the chat, not into the chat, but into the Q&A. Feel free to put questions in there. We'll get to them after I'm done. And do keep in mind that this is being recorded, so we'll circulate it and we'll also send the link to the slides that I'm presenting. And I want to thank Anita Brolux, who is our head of outreach, who is co-hosting the webinar, and she'll be reading the questions in the end and might be answering some of them as we go along. So apologies for just launching in without saying this. Okay, so the published papers, more often than not, are missing the details that we need to reproduce them. And this is typically how we talk about reproducibility. But then as you read what was going on in that project, Reproducibility Project Cancer Biology, a little further down in the article, Ed Yong writes, "So in every case, he," that's Tim Arrington, co-lead on that cancer biology project, "he had to ask the scientists behind the original experiments for the details of their work. Oftentimes, the person who actually did the experiments had left the lab, so an existing team member had to rummage through old notebooks or data files. The project ended up being hugely time-consuming for everyone concerned." And this is the side, if we pause for a second, this is the side of reproducibility that relates to the lab that did the original work, right? It has nothing to do with the paper itself already. This is about trying to find the methods and trying to repeat the work and trying to figure it out directly with the lab that published the paper. So it's not just unclear communication or some things being left out in the paper, this is a process that the participants in this initiative were going through with the labs that did the work. And in fact, a year and a half later, in 2018, the entire project stopped not with 50 papers that they were planning to introduce, but they stopped at just 18. And one of the big reasons for this was they just couldn't find the exact protocols that the labs used because people had moved on. There wasn't a good enough process detailing what was done and organizing the methods, so that even when you were in touch with the original lab that did the work, they couldn't find exactly what they've done. And so when we talk about reproducibility, usually we're thinking about published papers, and we're talking about what journals should improve, what funders should improve, how to write papers better, how to report data, and methods. But real reproducibility starts long before anyone is publishing, and this is something that applies to both academic and industry research. And one of my favorite quotes on this is, your primary collaborator is yourself in 6 months from now, and your past self doesn't answer emails. Right? And that's not even lab or company level reproducibility. That's the internal reproducibility for yourself. At least in the paper, you can email the original group. With yourself, if you forget what you've done or where the method is, there's no one to email. This is a quote that apparently is from software carpentry workshops in 2013. If you want to hunt down who initially said it, I just discovered it yesterday. I knew the quote long before, but apparently it's from 2013. And if you go to the slide in the notes, I have the link to this blog post, and you can see where this quote originated. There's a little bit of detective work there that's fun, but this is one of my favorite quotes, and I think it really sets up the public versus private side of reproducibility. So many people know of protocols.io. Most biomedical scientists have heard about protocols.io, have been to it. Most of them think about the public side, which is the open access repository with free to read and free to publish methods, and that's a key part of our mission. But actually, most people that create an account on protocols.io are using Carbon, are using protocols.io in the private mode that we'll be talking about here, and that's for that internal reproducibility. So we have 8,000 public and 28,000 private protocols, and every month there's about 1,000 new protocols created by 500-600 researchers, and of them 200 will be public, and the rest 700-800 are private. So the private side has enterprise level security. There are some things that are enhanced in the Carbon offering relative to the free version. And we'll go over some of these features right now. And the rest of the webinar will be focused on this Carbon side of protocols.io. Let's see if the video cooperates. So just a quick refresher, the protocols are not just static PDFs on protocols.io. We try to make them dynamic and interactive so that you can, long before publishing with your collaborators, or if you're in a company, you might you might never be publishing, so that you can easily detail all of the reagents that you use, put in components that are critical for yourself and others on your team to reproduce the work. And the three basic sides that you need to know when you get started on protocols.io in the private mode are the file manager, which allows you to organize your own work, the protocols, and anything related to the protocols that is important. The workspaces that allow you to collaborate with your colleagues within your lab or within your company. And then, of course, the editor for the protocols themselves that helps to make them those dynamic and interactive records that try to enable you to be as good as possible around reproducibility and around capturing the key details of the protocol. So the workspaces, if you create an account on protocols.io, you instantly get one of these workspaces and can invite colleagues to it. It's a central and secure location for organizing protocols, for sharing them easily, and importantly, it's not just for the protocols themselves. It's, as I said, also for any related files. So it's very similar to your file manager folder browser on your laptop or whatever computer you're using, unless you're in Linux through command line. So it's very similar file manager. I'll show just a glimpse of it in a second. And we try to help you, put in whether it's output or Excel files, PDFs, PowerPoint, so you can organize all of the things, not just the protocols themselves that are necessary for a project, and gives you space for digital online collaboration and discussions around the method development. When you create a workspace, you have a choice of whether it's visible or invisible. So if you create it in invisible mode, then that is invitation only, secure and private space for collaboration. The editor, as I showed, these are structured step-by-step instructions. So we've put a lot of effort into creating sort of like Microsoft Word or Google Docs, but custom tailored specifically for capturing the essential details of the steps in your instructions of the protocols. And you can organize sections. One of the parts that we've realized really helps with reproducibility, internal or external, is not just images, but being able to take a 10-second video with your phone, put it into a step, and having that render right in the protocol. The protocol editor has concurrent editing, so you can be working on the same document with colleagues. You can see exactly what they're changing, what their comments are. There is a history of changes, so there is an audit trail. And I'll also show in a second the run functionality that for field biology and lab, wet lab protocols allows you to use the protocol in sort of checklist cooking style way. And of course, commenting and discussions are integral to that collaborative method development. The file manager in the workspace, the file manager, as I said, is similar to the file manager you have on your computer, and you have easy export of everything that you work on. So you can send it to your computer, you can send all of your protocols or the files or all of the folders that you have. You can send to your device, or through easy integration, literally with a click, you can send it to Google Drive, Dropbox, and others. And once you create a workspace, this is whether visible or invisible, invitation only, or open to all to join. This is what the space looks like. On the left-hand side is navigation of the workspaces. This is how they look. It's not just folders and files and protocols, but for your lab or your team in a company, it organizes all of the protocols that you have, but also lets you have discussions, share resources, events, and sort of this extra layer of collaborative space around the method development. And this is what the editor looks like. So you can see a rich set of features on the right-hand side that are components where you can put in explicit amounts, reagents that you've used, equipment, if you're doing computational analysis, which data set, which p-values and parameters did you use when you were running your computational pipeline. We have integrations with, we've reached out to many vendors and have imported their reagent catalogs, so that instead of retyping which kit or which antibody you used where you ordered it, you would just click on reagent in the components on the right-hand side, enter catalog number, and then click on the right reagent that you're using. There's a lot of really good user interface visual cues for organizing the protocols and making it easy to use them. And as I said, you can see over here, there are components, comments, but also history of all of the changes on the protocol. And one of the things that Workspaces make so easy is that, yes, on an individual protocol, you can share by email, you can share with colleagues one by one, but when you work in Workspaces, you can share it with the entire team, with the entire lab. Just by creating a protocol in that space, it will be automatically shared, or you can move it into the workspace, and then everybody who is part of the team and is part of that workspace has access to it. And this is essential because whether it's in academia or industry, people move, people graduate, people leave companies. And what this ensures is that the protocol knowledge, the organized methods that a team uses stay in one place and don't disappear or hide inside notebooks as there is turnover. I promised a glimpse of the run functionality. So every step-by-step set of protocols has a run button, which allows you to, as you're doing the experiment, to go through, say I'm on step 9 right now, what am I doing next? If there's a timer, you can start it right on your phone in the fume hood. If you change anything as you're doing the experiment that day, you can make a quick note of it by clicking edit, and that you'll have a record of it in the workspace, in the folder where you decide to put it, so you can come back 6 months later and see how exactly you ran this protocol on that particular day on that particular sample. And also importantly for teams and for turnover is that both public and private protocols have versioning. So you can see exactly what was done before, but you can lock records, create new versions. And not only is there a trail history, but you can guide people to the most up-to-date version of a protocol, while at the same time giving them the ability to take a look at what your colleagues did or you did a year ago or 2 years ago before the updates with the tweaks and optimizations in the most current version. There's also a task manager, and I won't go through all of the features of the Carbon workspace, but everyone is welcome to create an account, start testing it. You get unlimited number of people that you can invite to a workspace that you create, and you can test virtually all of the functionality of Carbon as needed. And one thing I did want to show is, here's my new account that I just created for this demo. I just wanted to show what it looks like when you create a workspace. So the first thing is you're giving it a name. And this is where you choose whether this will be open to everybody or a private and secure version. You can instantly invite colleagues, or you can just skip this step, continue. And this is that profile page where the discussions, resources, news for your team or organization will go. You can go into administration and invite members, decide what kind of permissions they have. So there is a pretty granular administration of the team. You can decide what people can share, what they cannot share. Can they publish? Can they move things out of folders? So you have a lot of control. There's a reagent manager in there. And the workspace folder link takes you into the file manager where you can organize, create new folders, organize your work, and anything that you create in this space is going to be shared with all of the team members in this workspace. One thing to note is every workspace that you create by default has a folder with your name. So I'm New York Lenny with the little Protocols.io logo on it. This is your private folder in this public space, right? So any new content, any protocols that or files that I upload, PowerPoint, Excel, as we said, whatever you share in folders, new folders that you create in this space, those are accessible to everyone, but every workspace also has an individual's folder where you can have sort of your scratch space, and that's private and only visible to you and the administrator of the group. And as I said, there is fine-grained administration, both for individual members, but also on the workspace level around what are the permissions and settings around the workspace. So we are at 20 minutes and I promised time for Q&A. So I'll just end with one more slide and then open it up to questions. For those that are academics, I just want to note that Carbon is not $35 a month, it's $15.99 a month if you're using it for that internal reproducibility. Those that don't have the funds, there is a waiver page. It's very easy to apply where you can tell us if you're planning to be sharing the protocols publicly, if this is part of submission of a paper and they're going into peer review and you need more than those 5 free private protocols, you can click on the apply for the ARP, take a couple of minutes, and then we'll issue you a waiver for 3 months. And I should also mention that some of you might be from University of California, one of the other schools. There are many schools that have actually signed up for campus-wide Carbon for everyone, for students, teachers, staff, for Protocols.io. So if you go to Protocols.io/institutions, you can check whether your university or institute has campus-wide Carbon on Protocols.io. And of course, if you're in industry, you can create an individual team and add the right number of people and just put in a credit card if you max out the 5 free private protocols, but there are also enterprise plans and you can get in touch with us if you have questions about that. So just to repeat, the key benefits of the private side are improving that internal reproducibility to save you time, allow you to organize the work and make sure that it doesn't leave as team members do. And particularly in the time of coronavirus, when we can't stand next to each other, this helps to share your methods, to collaborate with your colleagues, simplifies protocol development, and helps you manage the protocols and any related files. So I will stop there, and Anita, if you can let me know, I can't easily see the questions, but if you can let me know what questions we have that are already coming in, I would be delighted to answer them.
Yes, there are already some questions, and if you have any questions, please feel free to add them into the Q&A section here in Zoom. You should see a button that has 2 little speech bubbles and says Q&A. That's the place to put questions. And the first question, I think you already answered it, but we can say it again. So I think somebody's university here has a university plan and they were wondering if they have access to Carbon.
Yeah, so if you go to this link, there's a drop down there that shows all of the universities that have a campus-wide site license for Protocols.io. And if you're in one of them, you can click on it and it'll give you the instructions. If you're using the institutional email, if you're at UCSF and you sign in with that, you'll have Carbon automatically. If you're using Gmail, Orchid, Yahoo to sign in, there's an easy way to choose your university and then send a verification email to your educational account.
Great. And then the next question is about shared notebook records. And the question is run the shared notebook record?
Sorry, the question is if you can run a
No,
share.
so the question is if because we say shared notebook records, and I think the person is wondering if the run functionality is related to the shared notebook records.
So the run functionality is on every protocol. You don't need to upgrade to Carbon for that. But if you have a workspace and it is Carbon, then you can also give others access, right, to the records of your run. So as you use the run functionality on the protocols, people can share sort of like opening up lab notebook type layer.
Great. And then another question is, are all invisible workspaces automatically Carbon?
They're sort of, they have pretty much all of the features with the exception of the shared notebooks and maybe one or two small other things, but they're pretty much all Carbon. And the limitation there is the amount of space that you have until you upgrade and the number of private protocols. So you can have 5 free private protocols and you can really test pretty much all of the features of Carbon. But then if you try to create a 6th private protocol, we ask you to either subscribe or make one of the existing protocols public.
Great. But it always starts out as basic when you set up your workspace.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. So those were all the questions that we had for now.
And there is one more in chat.
I think that was me.
That was Jonita to everyone. And I also want to highlight that I think I mentioned it, but very quickly, in terms of does everything start out Carbon, as I said, the limit is on the number of free private protocols that you have. It's not on the number of teammates that you can invite. So you can really create it for your group at a biotech or for your lab at a university, invite everyone and everyone can participate in that concurrent editing and most of the features that I showed.
Okay, there are actually a couple more questions that came in, and I think we have 2 more minutes left. So one question is, can the invisible workspace switch to visible later?
The answer is yes. So you have control over that. And if you start with a visible workspace and then you decide, actually, we just want it for our own lab, you can switch the other way too. The only thing that cannot be switched is if you make a protocol public, that remains public. There is a DOI, it might be cited. So it would still show up in search results and under your profile, but the workspaces themselves, you have control over whether they're public or private.
Great, and then there's one more question, and the person is confused about what the difference is between Carbon and not Carbon. So maybe we can just summarize again the difference between Carbon and not Carbon. So
this whole webinar was supposed to clarify it. So it is important that we answer that. The answer is basically everything is Carbon unless you're making the protocols public, right? And when you start on protocols.io, when you create a protocol, it's yours, it's private. You have to explicitly share it with other people or explicitly make it public. So the reason we have the product called Carbon, why we give it a name, is because the vast majority of people know of protocols.io as a free open access repository, and that's how most people come and visit and just consume the content on protocols.io. But the minority realize that you can create an account, you can use these protocols, it's a tool for private and secure collaboration, and that most people that actually have an account, the thousands of people that already have an account on protocols.io, most of them actually use it for that private collaboration. So to make sure that there is no confusion, we gave it its own name, that's protocols.io Carbon. So there's the repository side for publishing, for public sharing of protocols, getting credit for the work that you've done for the method development. And then there is the private collaborative tool, and that's Carbon.
Great, thank you. And I think we're up on time, but if you have any questions later, feel free to send us an email, and we're happy to answer questions later too.
And we'll share this recording and send it to everyone who's registered. And if there is anything that I didn't answer, you can either email info@protocols.io, or you can email me directly at lenny@protocols.io. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Anita.
Thank you.